Welcome to Stuck in My Mind podcast, the show where we dive into the mind of a regular guy on his road to self-discovery. You'll hear everyday people just like you share the latest topics, personal stories, and things they've learned along the way. And now, please welcome your host, Wise.
And welcome to another episode. I am your host, W-I-C-E. I can't even spell my name today.
It's a full moon day, so it just happens.
All right, let's get this straight. W-I-Z-E. And I have a very special guest on today. She's a women's transformation mentor, a TEDx speaker, an EFT practitioner. Welcome to the show, Catherine Ewing.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. Wherever this is. Where are you, actually?
Me, I'm originally from New York. Everybody sees that I always have New York in my background. I'm originally from New York, born and raised in Brooklyn. And now I live in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania.
Ah, well, that's quite a switch.
Yes, it is. I enjoy it, though. It's so much more peaceful.
Yeah.
I spent enough time in the city. I'm good. And I'm not that
I have
far
a daughter.
from it. So if I want to go visit, I can always go back to visit.
I have a daughter in Brooklyn, and I was actually born in Queens, but only lived there for a very short period of my life. So,
no, I'm a born, raised Brooklyn boy.
Full through and through.
Yeah, through and through. But it's a different. Believe me, it's a different experience up here. It's night and day. It's a rustling, bustling city to where I'm at now. It's just once it gets dark, it's quiet. All you hear is crickets, and on occasion you hear the bear knocking down the garbage.
Quite different noises than living in the city,
quite
right?
Different. Yes.
And ambulances.
Instead of fire trucks and ambulance and cop cars, I just got to worry about hearing the bear knock down the garbage can and how much of the mess I got to clean up the next day. But welcome to the show. This is a great honor to have you.
Thank you.
So you help women heal in trauma and everything. What motivated you to get in to do this? What made you want to get into this field?
Sometimes I think you're just born into something. I mean, from a very early age, I just sort of was, I'm the one who brought home the animals who didn't have a place to live. And, even as far as, caterpillars and the crawdads that I would pull out of the creek. I just was always very tuned into healing, and so I think family obviously plays a part too. Our own, and this is what I share with my clients, that our own experiences of trauma and loss and grief and whatever we've been through, I think plants the seeds for what's ready to maybe show up in our life at a later time. So, I had a brother with mental illness, and that later showed up as addiction, and he passed several years ago now. So that was in sort of the family. My mother passed literally on my final day of college when I was 22. So just as I was sort of getting ready to step into the next chapter of my life, I was going to get married. My mom passed suddenly. So dealing with becoming motherless at a pretty young age. I mean, I wasn't a kid, but neither was I a grown up by any means. And then my dad passed when I was 30. So by the time, I was 30 years old, I was sort of orphaned, So I think I just naturally lean into whether it's being a bit of an empath or whatever, into people who need some support. And it's funny because when I I went to graduate school to become a social worker, but I didn't plan to be a psychotherapist or to work one-on-one with people in that way. I went in because I was a social activist and I was a women's studies minor in college, and I wanted to do sort of community-based work. And I did that for about 12 years. So I worked in rape crisis work, sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse and neglect, severe family dysfunction, even union organizing, women in poverty. So I worked in very grassroots arenas for a lot of years, never planning to do social therapy. In fact, I sort of thought that was for rich people who wanted to contemplate their belly buttons. Like I didn't relate to it at all. I was much more hands-on. Let me get down and dirty with the real, hard work. And then we get called. I think sometimes we hear these calls from God, spirit, source, creator, whatever word you want to use for that infinite consciousness, right? And I started getting the bug in my ear about going into psychotherapy. So I joined a practice and pretty soon realized what I would call, and I'm trying not to be disrespectful of psychotherapy at all, but I would call the limitations of talk therapy. What do you do? How are you doing? How's your week going? Like it just seemed to have its limits. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to keep doing this because I want to help people do real healing, deep transformation, really kind of get to the root of what's brought them here, not just their day-to-day existence. And so that sent me on sort of a spiritual, metaphysical, energy healing path where I spent, I still am on it. I don't think I'll ever, sort of come to the end of it. I just think that's what we're here to do as spiritual beings, having this human experience, right? But I learned lots and lots of different techniques, energy healing techniques. I went through a very alternative seminary program that had a lot to do with the sort of reclaiming the divine feminine energy on the planet that has been so distorted for the last 2,000 years. And a very deep spiritual practice that I brought, and with tapping, that's when I learned tapping as well. And bringing that into the therapy world is what really allowed me to stay there and do the deeper work. And I was fortunate enough to be in a private practice. So I didn't have a lot of people watching what I was doing. I figured once I closed the door, it was me and the client, right? If they weren't telling, I wasn't telling. So, we did energy healing, we did sound healing. Once the door was closed, we went places that traditional talk therapy doesn't go. And I'm at the point now, 27 years later, of sort of letting go of the therapy practice and really sort of redefining myself as a coach, mostly so I can reach more people. Because, if the audience doesn't know, most people don't, but unlike a lot of other helping, doctors, and you can go from state to state, but as a therapist, you have to get relicensed in every state that you want to work in. So it's very limiting unless you want to be taking, all kinds of relicensing tests all the time. Whereas coaching really allows, me to work with people all over the world. So that's kind of the, I would also add, though, in terms of the professional stuff, my other personal experience was, as I mentioned, I was getting married when my mom passed. I was 22 years old. And then 30 years later, at 52, I made the really challenging decision to leave a 30-year marriage. So I stepped, and I left that therapy practice to open a healing center. I stepped out of my marriage. I left my 2,500 square foot home in the suburbs to go live in somebody's basement, a 200 square foot basement, for about a year and a half. I left my kids, I left my animals. I really left my financial security. So at 52, I really turned my life upside down, not because there was anything really awful. There was no abuse. There was no, drugs. There was no gambling. There was none of that. There was just two people going in different directions where I felt like in order to really be myself, I needed to step out of that marriage. So, I like to tell people I sort of jumped off the cliff all at once. I don't recommend that to people, all of that, plus going through menopause. It was quite the journey. I say there were days where even as a therapist, I couldn't tell whether I was just awakening spiritually or just having a complete and total mental and emotional breakdown. It was like, I don't know. I can't tell. I'll wake up tomorrow and see how it feels. So that's the compressed version.
No, well, it's kind of it's kind of amazing because my story situation as well as deals with grief. I was widowed at 31,
Mm,
and I had been with my wife since I was 21, and so I kind of grew up with her, and
yes.
she helped me find my spirituality because I'm not a religious person. I'm more of a spiritual person. I
Yes.
don't
Yes.
follow a set church rules. I don't, and so she started me on that path, and I think she started me on that path to prepare me for what was coming. And
Mm,
and after I lost her, I was lost for a while, and it was crazy because right after I lost her in 2008. I reunited with my father after 25 years of having no contact with him.
mm,
So that Father's Day weekend, I go to Puerto Rico. I get there Friday. Me and him speak. He's not doing too well. He's battling diabetes and stuff like that.
mhm.
But it was amazing because we got to I got to forgive him. I was able to speak to him and tell him I let go of all the anger I had towards him, and I was able to find closure.
Yeah.
That Saturday morning, he passed away. So and so those two, and then it was just a string of I lost my aunt, I lost my uncle, I lost my brother.
Mm,
A few years after that, I lose another brother that I reunited. That he's the oldest one from my father. He dies of an overdose. So all these tragedies and all these hurt. For a while, I was angry. I was
yeah.
upset. I didn't. I just didn't know how to cope. I didn't know how to deal with it. Of course, I sought therapy, got some help, but a lot of the things it was also me accepting and realizing that I don't have control over stuff like that, and being able to let that go and realize that that's what happens. This is life. That's why we need to embrace every moment that we have.
Mhm.
And it just once I realized that, listen, those things were out of my control. It lifted a lot of weight off of my shoulders.
Yeah. And it's not that I call it, we don't spiritually bypass our grief, right? The grief is real. They were people we loved and cared for. And of course, we want to allow ourselves to feel and process that, but we don't have to feel victimized by it or, like you said, just the recognition that life happens, right? People come and go in and out of our lives. And the more we can be in a place of acceptance with that. And when you mentioned your wife, and I'm sorry to hear of that loss, it sounds like, as you said, her influence on you, if you will, was almost a sort of a preparation, a path to allow you to be able to deal with and manage and process the next string of losses, perhaps differently than you might have if she hadn't been in your life.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And now I'm remarried. I have, and she's amazing. She's just amazing. She's also amazing. She sees so much in me, and that is inspiring to have someone support you. And because she sees that I do my podcast now, and she's like 100% supportive because she sees that I'm dedicated and I'm really doing the best that I can. I purchased the better equipment because I know in order for me to be successful, my content has to be quality. It has to sound good. It has to look well. So I went and invested money in equipment, but that's because I felt that's what I needed to improve. And it was just, and she sees this dedication for me into this, so she's like, okay, all right, and she just support. She doesn't listen to me. She doesn't listen to the podcast. She
But she
doesn't.
supports you. But
But
she's
she
your best
supports me.
supporter,
She'll
right?
download it. She'll download the episodes and everything and all that. But she's like, I speak to you every day. I listen to you every day. I don't want to listen to you at work. so
Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't want to listen to you in the car. So yeah, she doesn't listen to my episodes.
But you touched on such an important thing, which is someone's belief in you, right? Someone sees something in you, someone believes in you and supports you. And, in my experience, because I work with so many people who, have experienced a lot of dysfunction in their early life or loss or grief or parents who weren't present for one reason or another, or whether through just abandonment or mental illness, or you may have been released for adoption, or addiction, whatever it is. And we don't have that sense of somebody having our back, right? Somebody being there for us. And that impacts our sense of safety in the world. It's hard to really step into who we really are, right? Sorry about that. To take risks, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable when we don't feel like someone has our back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm curious though. What is your why for doing it? I almost sort of don't like that phrase. What's your why? But like, what was your passion around? What did you want to share with people that drove you to start the podcast?
Um, like you, I've always been someone. For some reason, I can feel when people are suffering or something, they have something going on, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to, I don't know, kind of guide them along the way and give them advice that I didn't even know I had, but it's just this feeling that I have that when people need to hear something, I kind of am able to kind of give them that
Mm-hmm. Oh,
advice or
I
that.
understand that. Yeah.
So, but the thing is, it's crazy because it's like prior, like like I said, she had already started me on my path of self discovery and self knowledge. So for years I had the keys I had the keys. It was just me not applying them to my own life, not applying what I've been learning. So now the difference is I get to speak to all these amazing teachers, all these amazing people, and learn lessons from all of them. And whatever I feel like, hey, that kind of resonates with me, I'm able to
Yeah.
apply those things, which I am now, which I am doing. And you can see, you can tell from where my podcast is going, how successful it's becoming, how I'm attracting the people that I want onto my show.
Yeah. There was something that you just said that just taking what resonates for you and leaving the rest, right? So I've been, as I said, on this sort of personal spiritual path Since, the mid 90s, probably before you were born.
Oh, actually, see, I'm 45 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well, you were still pretty young. So, I started studying energy healing in the mid 90s. So, this is a long path for me. And along the way, there are things that really resonated and things that didn't. And every spiritual teacher that I worked with, or pretty much everything I read said, take what resonates for you and leave the rest. It might not be your path. It may not be your time for this. You may circle back to this in 5 years or 10 years, and it'll resonate differently with you then. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day. I had posted something from Abraham Hicks, and they're like, "Oh, I love Abraham." And I said, "Well, so do I. But when I first started listening to Esther Hicks in the early 2000s, I couldn't stand her. I had to turn her off. Do you know Abraham Hicks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and I think it was for two reasons. One was where I was in my own vibration, but also she was just getting used to bringing Abraham through.
Oh, yeah.
And so there was a tone, or there was something, in the translation that it was like nails on a chalkboard. And I was like, no way. And I didn't listen for years. And then, maybe 5 years later, I listened back and it was like, oh, okay, I kind of like this. I don't know what it was that. So it's not always our time to.
No, that's where my path started was with Denise, my wife, introducing me to Abraham Hicks and Sylvia Brown and all these other people, and that's just where it started for me. That's just being able to listen to her channel him and all these other stories and everything else. It kind of like opened my eyes to like, okay, this is more deeper than people know it, but it's something that we're all capable of. This is something that we're all capable of doing if we truly believe that this is what we can do. They've like a lot of The Secret is one of my favorite movies because I read the book as well. But they had a man on there who had crashed his plane and he wasn't able to walk, but in his mind he saw himself walking. So he was able to heal himself with his mind and leave walking. I guess it was like under a year it took him to walk out of that. So for me, it's like,
well, Joe Dispenza broke his back, right?
Yeah.
He was the psychiatrist, the chiropractor who broke his own back. And then I'm trying to remember who the guy was. The other fellow was. It's not really that important, but yeah.
I just had one of my guests. He was a stunt man, and he severed his spine, and he's able to walk. He was able to walk and actually go back to doing stunts and
wow.
So it's amazing if we allow ourselves to believe and open our minds to things, what we're capable of.
Yeah. There's one quote from Abraham Hicks that I'll probably mess up when I try to repeat it exactly, but it's something like, the reason humans aren't growing limbs back, like if we, is because we just, in the conscious collective, we don't believe we can. Like an individual person might believe it, but there's still the energy of the collective that, is also part of that whole process. So when we start to believe that we can do it, then we'll do it. Yeah.
Because there's been stories of people growing back limbs. It's amazing. It's just like, it's amazing a lot of the things that people don't really realize or I guess don't want to look. I guess I just aren't, or I would say they just aren't prepared. They're not willing to see.
Well, I think if we're not exposed to it, which most of us are not,
Are not,
it
yes.
sort of takes someone, for me, um, opening my eyes to it. There was a woman, uh, she was just a mom when our kids were in first or second grade together. And she had a son who had some disability. She was a nurse by training and an APRN. And she had just gotten so fed up with um, traditional medicine and what it was not able to do for her son. And she started studying, sort of alternative methods. And again, this was back in the 1990s. But she was the first person who introduced me to, energy work and alternative healing modalities. And, again, I think the first thing that I really studied was therapeutic touch. And then I went on, to become a Reiki master in 1999. And then that sort of blew the doors open. I think that's, for me, that's the biggest thing that Reiki has done. It's like a door opener. But if Jocelyn had not seen something in me and said, hey, this is something you might be interested in, or, I'm having a group of women coming over my house next week to share some and thoughts with them or whatever. And we became this circle of 5 or 6 women who just started, really diving into deeper healing practices and metaphysics and all of that. So, which is why, what you're doing is so important, because the sharing of the word, I think now is even more important maybe than it was back then, because we are in such a period of transmutation and transformation. Literally the whole world is inside out and upside down right now. And for people to be able to hear that there's a higher purpose here. Maybe things have to fall apart before we can recreate the world that we want, right? Doesn't have to be the apocalypse, doom and gloom. It can be, no, these systems, we're kind of flawed already. Let's face it. And maybe they really do need to collapse or fall down before we can create something from a higher vision, right? From our higher spiritual perspective.
Yeah, well, yeah, because there's a meme that's going. It's just like this. We're programmed right now to work till we're 65 and then retire and enjoy the last 11 years of our lives or whatever. No, I don't. I'm not with that. Like me and the wife, we've decided that every 6 months we're gonna schedule a vacation and go away and enjoy and do things. And even now, we don't. Our kids are grown. It's like, okay, one day we felt, hey, let's go to Cleveland, go visit some friends, and we drove to Cleveland, and that's what we're doing. I was like, hey, I want to go do this. All right, let's go do it, and we'll go do it. And we've just come to the realization that that's what we want to do, is enjoy our time. Yes, we have to work because we have to pay the bills and everything, but our own personal time, we take it and enjoy life.
Yeah. I mean, in my case, that feels particularly poignant because my parents didn't even live to that. Like, my mom passed when she was 60. My dad struggled after my mom died, and so they retired him early because, he was struggling. He started drinking some, and he'd been with the same company for, over 30 years. Um, but they didn't even really reach the point in their lives, and they raised 8 children, but they didn't reach that point in their lives after all the hard work, after all the sacrifice, after everything we put them through, to be able to really sit back and enjoy, the fruits of their labor, if you want to, call it that, or time with their grandchildren, or, all the things that we're promised if we work hard to get to that point. And I think more and more people are saying, nah, that's kind of backwards. I want to enjoy life here
Yeah.
and now.
Yeah. And
I'm
that's
trying to
and that's
figure
why.
out how I'm going to get myself a van that I can convert into a camper, take myself on the road, work from the road as long as I can have Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And that's the amazing thing now with technology is I can do this from anywhere. Like I went to Jamaica and I didn't take any equipment with me because the wife would have killed me because it was a vacation. So, but had I
Yeah.
wanted to, I could have taken some equipment with me and recorded over there. But yeah, I can do this remotely. That's my ultimate goal is to be able to do this. And I started a production company, and where we launched the internet radio station. And my goal is to ultimately just focus on that and build that and say sayonara to my 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's so doable. I mean, it's one of the other reasons why, I can make this shift from therapist to coach, uh, because we do have all this technology. I've worked with clients in South Africa and Alaska and Austria, Australia. I'm just going through this, starting with the A's. But really, there's no limit anymore, right? It's the world is really at our fingertips if we can find ways. And more and more, I think with COVID, more and more people are really asking that question. Am I really living the life I want to be living? Am I doing what I want to be doing? Is there something more, something bigger that wants to be birthed in me? And that's, when I work with women, I work with a lot of women in midlife and midlife transition. And, I explained a little bit about my experience in my, early to mid 50s. But as you said, you've raised your kids, you've put in some time. And now for women in particular, because I'm thinking biologically menopause, right? We're through those years. We're not going to be birthing any more children, but we still, our careers are probably winding down. Whatever relationships, either we're still in them or we're not. But either way, we've been there, done that. And now it's like, it's not time to just sit back and grow old. Like we still have this life force energy, this creative force that flows through us. And now we get to birth a new version of ourselves, right? We've birthed all the other stuff already. Now we can focus all of that beautiful creativity and life force and passion and, decide, what do we want this next chapter to look like? Because it's probably going to be a third of your life. I mean, I've already lived 2/3 of my life, and I'm not slowing down anytime soon unless I just want to take more vacations. I am booked to go to Machu Picchu next year, which is kind of cool, but that's a whole nother story. But I used to say it's not our grandmother's or even our mother's menopause anymore. We're not going to sit in the rocking chair and, watch life pass us by. We want to be vibrant. We want to be relevant. We want to be vital. We want to bring our wisdom and our experience to the world in a way that can support other people coming behind us. I often use this example of, sort of turning around to whatever woman's coming up behind me and offering her my hand and saying, here, I've walked that trail, right? I've blazed that trail. I'm happy to help you come through. So, it's an exciting time.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
exciting time to be in the world, even though it's crazy.
It is. But you know what? You adapt. You don't. You can like. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't make no sense to just bitch and complain and moan about it. You know what? I'll face it head on and continue to do what I'm doing because that's what I'm meant to do. Is like, I'm not going to let, and I lost some friends. I've lost some dear friends to COVID and everything. But this past year, I've been blessed with a little bit of success as far as my podcast and the things that I'm doing. And at first, I kind of like didn't want to celebrate it because of what was going on.
Mm.
And my nephew said, "No, you need to celebrate it. It's like these are accomplishments. These are things you need to celebrate. You need to be proud of what you're doing. You can't. Yes, life is hard and there's tragedies going on, but you need to celebrate your accomplishments. You need to celebrate your life. You need to celebrate what you're doing because you're doing some positive things."
Yeah, smart kid.
He's actually older than me. So he's more my brother. He's more like my brother. We grew up as brothers because I was a late baby. All my other siblings from my mom have me by 11 years and older. So he's one of my older siblings' son, and he's
Yeah,
a couple of
almost
years
more
older
like
than
you're the
me.
same generation.
Yeah, so we grew up together in the same household. We grew up as brothers. We didn't grow up as uncle and nephew.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a different relationship. But for him to say that, and then for him to also be another person who's, when I say, "Hey, I want to do this," he goes, "Okay, let's go." To have another person that's down like that is awesome. It's for me, it's being blessed to have the people that I have around me,
Yeah.
and that's the energy that I'm putting out there, and I'm realizing that more and more, that it's the energy that I'm putting out there that's bringing the people that I need in my
Yeah.
life and in my circle.
It's a really important point because it's not just it's not random, right? Everything is based on energy. Everything is based on energetic frequency. And if you look at it from, I'll go back to Abraham Hicks, the emotional guidance scale, right? Emotions are energy in motion. Every emotion has its own vibrational frequency and its own chemistry in the body. It's how we tell the difference between joy and grief or happiness and sadness, right? It just feels, the higher vibrations feel lighter and higher in the body. The guilt, the blame, the despair, the shame, that shit feels heavy. Like, right? It's so when we, and my understanding and my belief is that we all have our own vibrational frequency based on past experiences, what kind of emotions we're still holding in our field, if we haven't resolved our trauma. And this is something that I work around with people a lot. I'm like, excuse my French, but we got to pump the shit out of the septic tank so that we so we can bring some more light in there. It's really dark in there, right?
Yeah.
And when you mentioned sometimes people will fall off and fall away, and that's because as you've raised your, as any of us, or as you've raised your own vibration, people who you used to be a vibrational match with, you're no longer vibing with. Literally, their vibrations and your vibration no longer match. And so, I mean, that's, when I look at my marriage, right? 30 years later, we were just in different places. And I'm not saying he wasn't on a journey or on his path, but, my very committed spiritual path and doing all the healing work that I was doing. And, sadly, it created a gap that was sort of too big. But then other people will come in, when we get stabilized in our higher frequencies, then we start attracting people, circumstances, experiences that match us at that new frequency.
Yeah.
And sometimes people get stuck because they're afraid they're going to lose friends or family, or they're going to be judged, or they're going to be, whatever it might happen to be. But if you're committed to being the highest expression of yourself in the world, stepping into your, I call it your Christed energy, or your Christed self, or you're just your highest spiritual version of who you are, you've got to be willing to let some things fall away, things that are no longer a match for you, at whatever new level of frequency or vibration or thoughts or belief system, And you
And
mentioned something earlier about, not getting into the criticism and the judgment and all of that, or not complaining. And people don't realize that complaining is a really low vibration, right? Criticizing, judgment. And those things will keep us stuck. They'll keep us where we are, and we don't realize how much I'll speak for myself. In a day, I could complain about the weather or complain about how, I'm tired. Like, it's so habitual until, as you said, we begin to adopt the practices very intentionally and do the gratitude journal. Be aware of what words are coming out of your mouth. Catch your thoughts and say, do I even really believe that? Or is that just something I've been repeating for the last 30 years, right? Whose thought is that? It is that intention and that consistency that will change things over time. You can tell I get a little passionate about this topic, right?
It's crazy. For me, it's been amazing because a lot of my guests, honestly, the last 3 to 4 months have been amazing, and a lot of it has to do with being your authentic self. A lot of my guests is being who you truly are meant to be, and that's where a lot of the key concepts that a lot of people share, especially people who are truly trying to be their authentic selves. Those are the people, like I said, those are the people I am attracting to my show. Those are the people I'm attracting to speak to me, and I to them, and being able to pick, like I said, just pick up whatever I felt like. Hey, that little nugget that they said, I like that. That kind of applies to me in a way. Let me use that. Let me add that.
Yeah.
And at first, like I had kind of felt like I was being selfish. And one of my guests said, "Why are you being selfish?" I was like, "Oh, because I'm using. I get to.
I'm using these people to get what I need."
Yeah, I'm using these people to gain knowledge." And he's like, "That's self-love. That's you wanting to grow as a person. That's not selfishness. And you're sharing this with other people. You're putting it out there for other people to listen, and also pick up from these nuggets and pick up from these jewels that these people are dropping."
Yeah, it's self-love, and it's also the universe bringing you what you need in any moment, both for your own personal, right, and spiritual growth, and for you to spread the word to other people. Because, as light beings, as those of us who feel some calling to share and, be in the world in a different way, the universe will use us, just like it uses Esther Hicks. I mean, not all of us are channeling, but we are inspired, and we share that inspiration, and we get those nuggets, and it's universal truths, right? So, and it doesn't belong to anyone. I used to think, oh my God, I can't say that. That's somebody else said, and it's like I'm stealing their stuff. And I wouldn't intentionally go and plagiarize somebody now, but I'm like, these are universal truths. I can stop worrying about, I'm stealing that person's content. Well, no, you've been studying this, first of all, for like 30 years. So you might have some of your own opinions by this point, but there are, we also know that there are things that are wisdom and truth that so many of us are being called to share with the world at this time.
Yeah.
Years ago during a meditation, I got a very powerful download, and I use the name Yeshua for Jesus. And so Yeshua and Mary Magdalene made their presence very known to me, which, I don't usually get really strong, like, oh my God, they're standing right behind me. But what they shared with me was that, my mission, and I actually used to have a podcast called Creating Heaven on Earth, but part of my mission was to create heaven on earth. Now, however many years ago that was, about 2008. So, 14 years ago, I was like, what? What does that even mean? And they were talking about balancing the divine masculine and the divine feminine energy, and needing to bring, the divine feminine, back into, just energetically back into the world again, because it had been suppressed for so long. So why was I telling you that story? I think all of us have a part to play in creating heaven on earth, right? Any of us who are stepping in and stepping up in a bigger way, moving through fears, taking risks, putting ourselves out in the world. I think it's all in service to creating heaven on earth. We don't have to ascend anywhere. We can begin to bring this energy of love and peace and freedom and gratitude and appreciation and joy and passion right here, right here. Just like retirement. We don't have to wait till, we kick and then find it someplace else. We bring it here, we embody it, and as we walk through the world, whether we know we're doing it or not, we're emanating it to those around us.
Oh man, this has been great. I love these conversations. I love that I'm able to connect with people, and that's what's so amazing about podcasting and what's going, and especially with what's going on around the world, that I get to speak to people remotely, get to speak to people all over the world, and just be able to learn and grow. So I appreciate you coming on. This has been awesome. I love speaking to people, especially people that the knowledge, especially with the knowledge that you have and everything that you're sharing. I love that. Those are things that like I said, when she started me on my path to self-discovery and self-learning, that's where I started at, was Abraham Hicks and all that. So I knew what you were talking about. And for me, it was like, oh man, like I've known this for so long.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing was, we hadn't had any contact really before we jumped on. And I was just like, because most times people, like, we have a little conversation ahead of time. And so it was just like, you know what, I'm just trusting the universe. If we got connected, we're meant to have this conversation. It's going to go wherever it goes. It's going to flow wherever it flows. And whatever it's going to be, it's
my show is not scripted. It is not scripted. I have had very few, like, we might speak for a minute prior to recording, but I'd rather just flow naturally and just be able to speak naturally and just let it flow, just let it go and have a good time doing it.
And finding those areas, they were like, okay, he's a New York guy. I had a little connection to New York, and I talked about loss and grief, and you experienced loss and grief, and then the Abraham stuff. So there were like these points, these intersection points where we could just sort of connect about life that then allowed us to open up a bigger conversation.
Yes, exactly.
And I love that about your show. It's like you just show up and this is life, right? That's your life. This is my life. And look, even though our lives are very different, we still have places of intersection. We still have similarities. We still have experiences. We still have grief. We still have loss. We still have love,
Yep, absolutely. So now is the part of the show where you get to shamelessly plug everything.
Shamelessly plug. Well, so if people, probably the easiest thing, because I didn't prepare a whole bunch of links or anything, but my website is called Sacred Heart Alchemy, because I really believe that all the shift, the change happens through the alchemy of the heart, right? When we live from our heart. So Sacred Heart Alchemy is my website. If you sign up for my newsletter there's a free gift. I think right now what's on there is a meditation and a journal around finding your life purpose. So, there's a little free gift there. I'm in the process of putting together a quiz and then a webinar on finding your own particular response to stress and post-traumatic stress disorder, and then learning how to unravel that and work with that. So, there's things coming up. I don't have anything right this moment to invite anyone into, unless, if they want to have a conversation with me, they can just fill out the contact form on my website, and that's all good.
Yeah. I appreciate you being on. This has been great. Don't leave just yet. After my shout outs, we'll chat a little bit more after we end the recording, but it is now time for shout outs. Big shout out to my Real Wise fam, Brandy J, Bobby J. Love you guys. Big shout out to the boss lady, Fina. Love you, baby. Appreciate you. And as always, a big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless you. Be safe. And you know how your boy Wise does it. Peace out.
Thanks for listening. Listen on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and TuneIn. Find us on social media on Twitter @wise_B_blunt, Instagram @wise_B_blunt, and a Facebook fan page, www.facebook.com/wise76. Check back soon for new episodes. Until next time, peace out.